The courthouse clock struck 9 on that cold February morning in downtown Phoenix, Arizona. Judge Patricia Williams adjusted her reading glasses as she reviewed the day's docket, unaware that in just a few hours, she would witness something that would forever change how she viewed justice, sacrifice, and the power of remembrance. In the holding area beneath the courthouse, a man named Robert Chen sat quietly on the metal bench. His weathered hands trembled slightly, not from fear of the upcoming hearing, but from the bitter cold that seemed to live permanently in his bones these days. At 58, Robert looked much older. His once proud military posture had been worn down by 3 years of sleeping on park benches and seeking shelter wherever he could find it. The charge was simple: trespassing. Robert had been caught sleeping behind a downtown restaurant, trying to escape the desert wind that had turned unusually harsh that week. The restaurant owner, a kind man named Marcus, had actually brought Robert a cup of coffee and a sandwich before calling the police. He hadn't wanted to press charges, but city ordinances required it. As Robert was led into the courtroom, he straightened his shoulders as much as his tired body would allow. The jacket he wore was donated from a local shelter, 2 sizes too big but clean. His gray hair was neatly combed, and despite everything, there was still something dignified about the way he carried himself. Judge Williams looked down at her papers as the bailiff called the case. Robert Chen, charged with criminal trespassing. She had seen hundreds of similar cases over her 20-year career on the bench. Homelessness had become an epidemic in their city, and she tried her best to balance compassion with the law. What she didn't know was that Robert had been watching her for years, not as a judge, but as the daughter of someone very special from his past. Patricia Williams was the daughter of Sergeant Major James Williams, Robert's commanding officer in Vietnam over 4 decades ago. As Judge Williams began to address Robert, asking him to state his name for the record, something in his bearing caught her attention. There was a military precision in the way he stood, a respect in his posture that seemed familiar. Robert spoke clearly, his voice carrying across the courtroom with surprising strength. Robert Chen, Corporal, United States Army, retired. Service number 238475992, ma'am. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Williams felt her heart skip a beat. That voice, that cadence, the formal way he presented himself. She had heard her father tell stories about his men in Vietnam, and there was one name that always came up when he spoke about courage and sacrifice. Judge Williams set down her papers and looked directly at Robert. She noticed the small American flag pin on his donated jacket, faded but still proudly displayed. Her mind raced back to countless dinner conversations with her father, who had passed away just 5 years earlier. "Corporal Chen," she said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Were you stationed in the Central Highlands of Vietnam in 1968? Robert's eyes widened in surprise. "Yes, ma'am, I was. Echo Company, 2nd Battalion." The judge felt tears welling up in her eyes as memories flooded back. Her father had told her about a young soldier named Robert Chen who had saved his life during an ambush near Pleiku. How this brave young man had risked everything to drag her wounded father to safety, staying with him for 6 hours in hostile territory until rescue arrived. Judge Williams stood up from her bench, something that shocked everyone in the courtroom. The bailiff looked confused, the court reporter stopped typing, and the few people in the gallery leaned forward in curiosity. "Corporal Chen," she said, her voice now trembling with emotion, "did you know a Sergeant Major James Williams?" Robert's weathered face transformed as recognition dawned. His eyes filled with tears as he nodded slowly. "Sergeant Major Williams was the finest man I ever served under, ma'am. He taught me what honor meant. I heard he made it home safely and had a beautiful family." "He did," Judge Williams whispered, tears now streaming down her face. "And one of his daughters became a judge, inspired by his stories of justice and the good men he served with. Men like you, Corporal Chen." The courtroom was completely silent now, witnessing something extraordinary. Judge Williams stepped down from her bench and walked toward Robert, something unprecedented in her courtroom. My father told me about you, she continued, her voice breaking. He said you saved his life, but more than that, you showed him what true courage looked like. He never forgot you, Corporal Chen. He talked about you until the day he died 5 years ago. Robert stood straighter now, tears flowing freely down his face. Your father saved my life too, ma'am. Not just in Vietnam, but every day after. He taught me to never give up. To always serve with honor. I'm sorry I haven't lived up to that lately. Judge Williams shook her head firmly. You have lived up to it, Corporal. You served your country with honor. What happened to you could happen to any of us. But you're still here, you're still fighting, and that's what matters. She turned to address the courtroom, her voice now strong and clear. This man is a hero. He risked his life to save my father and countless others. He served our country with distinction, and now our country needs to serve him. Judge Williams dismissed all charges against Robert immediately. But she didn't stop there. She contacted her friend Sarah Martinez, who ran a non-profit organization helping veterans find housing and employment. Within the hour, Sarah was in the courtroom, ready to help Robert get back on his feet. The story spread quickly through the courthouse and then through the local news. The restaurant owner Marcus, who had originally called the police, was so moved when he heard what happened that he offered Robert a job and a small apartment above his restaurant. But perhaps the most touching moment came 3 months later, when Judge Williams invited Robert to her father's grave for the anniversary of his death. They stood together in silence, two people whose lives had been forever connected by the service and sacrifice of Sergeant Major James Williams. Robert placed a small American flag on the grave and saluted. Judge Williams stood beside him, finally understanding why her father had always said that the bonds forged in service never break, they just wait for the right moment to reveal themselves. As they walked away from the cemetery together, Robert turned to Judge Williams and smiled. You know, he said, your father always said that kindness was the greatest form of courage. Today, you proved him right. This story reminds us that we never know when our paths might cross with someone whose life has touched ours in ways we never imagined. Every person we meet carries a story, a history, and a heart that deserves our compassion and respect. Sometimes, it takes just one moment of recognition, one act of kindness, to change everything. Judge Williams could have simply processed another trespassing case that day, but instead, she chose to see the man behind the circumstances, the hero behind the hardship. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Pure Kindness Stories. Share this tale of unexpected connection and compassion with others who need to be reminded that kindness has the power to transform lives, heal old wounds, and honor the sacrifices of those who have served. Remember, every act of kindness creates a ripple effect that can reach across decades and touch lives in ways we may never fully understand. Be that ripple of kindness in someone's life today.